There is a forgotten grain that packs more protein than wheat, delivers more calcium than milk, and once fueled an empire. In 1519, Spanish conquerors declared it an enemy of the state, burning fields and maiming any hand that dared plant it. 500 years later, big agriculture faces ruin, as the same plant, now evolved into an unstoppable superweed, breaks their billion-dollar system. Why would the world erase a superfood, and how did it fight its way back? Here is the hidden war no one ever told you about. In the world of the Aztecs, amaranth was more than just a crop. It was woven into the fabric of daily life and the heartbeat of their most sacred ceremonies. Alongside maize and beans, amaranth stood as one of the three great tribute grains demanded by the empire, its seeds flowing into the capital from provinces across the land. Tribute rolls and codices record entire regions, taxed not in gold, but in sacks of amaranth. In the bustling markets and kitchens, amaranth found its way into porridges, tamales, and breads. But its true power came alive in ritual. Each year during the festival of Huitzilopochtli, priests and artisans would grind amaranth seeds with honey and agave sap, kneading the dough into sacred forms, idols of gods, towering figures meant to be broken and shared among thousands. This practice, called sawali, blurred the line between food and faith. Eating the idol was an act of devotion, a way to bring the divine into the mortal body. Archaeobotanical finds confirm amaranth's deep roots in the Chinampa soils of the Valley of Mexico. Charred seeds and pollen found in layers predating the conquest speak to centuries of cultivation. Even the tribute lists, pictographic records from the Codex Mendoza, show amaranth bundled for delivery, a currency of the empire's power. While maize filled the bellies of the masses, amaranth fed the spirit of the state. For the Aztec elite, it was a symbol of abundance and authority. A crop that linked the cycles of the earth to the ceremonies of the heavens. This was not a marginal food. In some provinces, amaranth was so central that its absence would have meant the collapse of both feasts and festivals. The Spanish would soon recognize this and see in these seeds not just nourishment, but a threat to the new order they aimed to impose. In 1519, the rules of food and faith changed overnight. Spanish conquistadors led by Hernán Cortés saw amaranth not as a crop, but as a threat. Its seeds kneaded into gods, and its rituals a mirror of the communion they claimed as sacred. The response was swift and absolute. Colonial authorities declared amaranth illegal, tying the plant's fate to the empire's new order. Edicts swept through the valleys, and the punishment for defiance was severe. Historical accounts describe fields set ablaze across central Mexico, over 10,000 hectares torched in a campaign to erase the grain from both soil and memory. Smoke rose where once there had been harvest, the blackened earth a warning to anyone who dared plant forbidden seeds. The crackdown did not end with fire. Farmers accused of growing amaranth faced brutal reprisals. Chronicles from the period describe hands cut off as a penalty, an act meant to silence not just the growers, but the entire culture that depended on the crop. Inquisition records from the 1530s and the 1540s list fines and whippings for those caught tending secret plots. The destruction was systematic, temples razed, shrines emptied, and tribute lists rewritten to favor wheat and maize. Amaranth, once a symbol of abundance and power, became a mark of suspicion. Yet even as the official records erased it, the story of amaranth's suppression survives in the margins, hidden in parish logs, whispered in mountain villages, and traced in the sudden drop of amaranth pollen in archaeological layers after 1521. The campaign to wipe out the grain was not just about food. It was a war on memory, on identity, on the right to choose what would nourish a people. The legacy of those scorched fields and severed hands would echo for centuries, setting the stage for a different kind of reckoning, one measured not in burnt acres, but in the quiet resilience of seeds that refuse to disappear. Amaranth's greatest secret lies inside each tiny seed. Unlike wheat, which falls short in a critical building block called lysine, amaranth packs this essential amino acid in abundance. Lysine is the missing link in most grains, a molecule the body cannot make, but needs for muscle repair, immune strength, and even childhood growth. In wheat, lysine is scarce. In amaranth, it is plentiful, up to 100 milligrams per gram of protein. According to United States Department of Agriculture data, this single detail changes everything. With lysine in the mix, amaranth becomes a complete protein, rivaling the quality of meat, eggs, or soy. Every bite delivers the full spectrum of essential amino acids, unlocking nutrition that wheat alone cannot provide. There is more. When amaranth is cooked, boiled, popped, or simmered into porridge, its protein becomes even more digestible. Studies show that heat breaks down natural inhibitors, raising true protein digestibility to over 90%. That means the body can actually use what is inside, not just pass it through. The result is a grain that delivers more usable protein per serving than most cereals, and does it without the gaps or shortfalls that leave diets incomplete. For anyone living without regular access to animal protein, or anyone seeking a plant-based source that stands on its own, amaranth offers a rare promise, a seed that nourishes like a steak but grows from the earth. The Aztecs may have worshipped its ritual power, but modern nutrition science confirms its everyday strength. In the quiet chemistry of lysine and complete proteins, amaranth reveals why it was once the empire's grain of choice. And why, for those who know its secret, it still is. For people who cannot eat wheat, amaranth is not just a substitute, it is a relief. This grain contains no gluten at all. The proteins that trigger inflammation and digestive pain at millions, gliadin and glutenin, are simply missing. That makes amaranth safe for celiac diets and anyone avoiding the discomforts of modern bread. But the real surprise hides in its mineral content. Amaranth delivers 4 times more calcium than wheat, and 2 times as much iron. 1 cup of cooked amaranth can outpace a glass of milk in calcium, and its iron content rivals that of red meat. These are not trace amounts. They're the kind of numbers that matter for bone health, for childhood growth, for anyone at risk of anemia. Beyond the kitchen, amaranth's biology gives it an edge that wheat cannot match. It uses C4 photosynthesis, a rare trick among broadleaf crops. In practical terms, this means amaranth pulls in carbon dioxide more efficiently, especially under intense sun and heat. Where wheat wilts in drought, amaranth keeps growing, using less water for every ounce of grain. In fields from India to Arizona, it thrives in heat waves that leave other crops gasping. That is why agronomists call it a climate survivor. The same pathway that powers invasive weeds now fuels a food crop ready for a hotter world. For anyone searching for a grain that is gentle on bodies and tough on the environment, amaranth stands alone, nutritionally dense, mineral-rich, and built for the age of extremes. In 2004, a cotton field in Macon County, Georgia, became the epicenter of a new agricultural crisis. Weed scientists led by Stanley Culpepper walked the rows, expecting the usual aftermath of glyphosate spraying. Dead weeds and clean soil. Instead, towering Palmer amaranth plants stood untouched, their leaves green and defiant. The herbicide that had controlled fields for nearly a decade had failed. Lab tests confirmed the impossible. These plants were immune to glyphosate. The culprit was not a single mutation, but a genetic sleight of hand. Inside each cell, Palmer amaranth had multiplied copies of a gene called EPSPS. Glyphosate works by targeting this enzyme and shutting down a pathway essential for plant growth. But with up to 160 copies of the EPSPS gene, Palmer amaranth simply overwhelmed the chemical, producing so much enzyme that the herbicide was rendered useless. Under the microscope, fluorescent markers lit up the extra gene copies like city lights at night. This was not slow evolution. It was a genetic jailbreak triggered by years of unbroken chemical pressure. Within months, fields across Georgia and then the wider South told the same story. Amaranth that refused to die. For farmers, the consequences were immediate. Where one plant survived, 100,000 seeds would scatter on the wind. Crews were forced to pull millions of weeds by hand, acre by acre, as combines jammed on stalks thicker than baseball bats. The Roundup era, once seen as the end of weed problems, had instead created a new adversary that could not be sprayed away. The genetic loophole exploited by Palmer amaranth set off alarms in laboratories and boardrooms alike. The battle for control of America's fields had entered a new phase, and the rules had changed. Palmer amaranth didn't creep into the landscape quietly. Within a decade of that first glyphosate-resistant field in Georgia, it swept across the American South and Midwest, overrunning more than 20 million acres of soybeans and corn. On USDA maps, the red blotches of infestation spread like a rash, county after county reporting fields choked with stalks taller than a man, each one able to drop 1 million seeds in a single season. For farmers, the reality hit hard and fast. Combines built to chew through soy and corn stalled on stems as thick as broom handles. In Arkansas and Tennessee, crews abandoned harvests mid-row, forced to clear Palmer by hand at a cost of $200 an acre. Money that once went to seed and fertilizer now funneled into labor just to keep the fields open. The economic fallout spiraled. USDA estimates put annual losses from Palmer amaranth and its cousins at over $1 billion, factoring in both yield reductions and the mounting cost of chemical and manual control. In 2010, Illinois growers watched as 90% of a soybean field was written off. Palmer had slipped in with contaminated seed, and by the time the mistake was caught, it was too late to save the crop. Extension offices issued warnings a single escape plant could seed the next decade's problem. Machinery dealers fielded calls about combine damage and the need for custom retrofits, as blades dulled and belts snapped under the strain of rogue amaranth. Agronomists called it a weed apocalypse. In some counties, local ordinances mandated equipment cleaning between fields to slow the spread, but the seeds traveled on wind, boots, and truck tires. The monoculture model, plant, spray, repeat, had met its match. Fields once managed by chemistry alone now demanded a return to hand labor, crop rotation, and vigilance. A safety warning for all would-be growers. Palmer amaranth is listed as a federally noxious weed in several states. Never plant or share seed unless you are certain of the variety. The same resilience that makes amaranth a survivor in the wild turns it into a destroyer in the wrong field. For Big Ag, the lesson was bitter. The plant they tried to erase had come back, not as a forgotten grain, but as a billion-dollar threat no herbicide could contain. A single amaranth seed holds the blueprint for abundance. In backyard plots and small fields, edible varieties such as Amaranthus hypochondriacus, known as Hopi Red Dye and Golden Giant, can reach 8 feet in a single season. Each plant becomes a living seed factory, producing more than 100,000 seeds before the first frost. Researchers at the Rodale Institute and land-grant universities have measured yields of up to 2,000 pounds per acre in well-tended plots, rivaling or exceeding traditional grains under low-input conditions. This is not a crop that demands perfect soil or constant attention. Amaranth has deep roots and C4 photosynthesis, so it thrives where wheat and corn struggle through blistering heat, erratic rain, and even poor sandy ground. Its resilience has made it a staple in the highlands of Oaxaca, the dry valleys of Arizona, and experimental urban gardens from Kentucky to the Midwest. Home growers report that a handful of seeds can fill a raised bed with towering stalks, each one crowned with a plume of tiny protein-rich grains. The diversity of edible amaranth is staggering. Beyond Hopi Red Dye and Golden Giant, there is Amaranthus caudatus, the love lies bleeding of old world gardens, along with dozens of local land races from Mexico, India, and Africa. All share the same trait. A single plant can multiply itself 100,000 times in one growing season. For anyone seeking food security, this is nature's answer to scarcity. One seed, one summer, and the cycle begins again. No patent required, no permission asked. Every seed of amaranth carries its own passport to survival. Unlike most modern grains, edible amaranth varieties remain open-pollinated, meaning anyone can save seeds from their harvest and replant year after year without losing vigor or yield. There are no patents, no annual licensing fees, and no need to ask permission from any company or government. This is true seed sovereignty, food security that grows from the ground up, not from a corporate catalog. The grain's resilience is more than legend. Trials from Arizona to Rajasthan show amaranth thriving through triple-digit heat and weeks without rain. Extension agents from land-grant universities now recommend it for home gardens and small farms facing unpredictable weather. In places where wheat and corn wither, amaranth keeps producing, its deep roots pulling moisture from where other crops find only dust. Seed banks around the world, from the USDA National Plant Germplasm System to Native Seed Search, offer dozens of amaranth strains, each adapted to local climates and traditions. For growers seeking reliable sources, the best starting points are public seed banks, regional extension offices, and trusted nonprofit organizations. Many offer guidance on identifying edible species, saving seeds, and avoiding the wild, invasive cousins. With open genetics and a global network of stewards, amaranth stands apart as a grain for anyone, anywhere. In the face of climate extremes, it is a quiet answer, one that grows stronger with every hand that saves a seed. Amaranth isn't just a relic. It is a living challenge to monoculture and chemical dependence. As climate extremes threaten wheat and corn, this grain's resilience and nutritional edge become urgent. Big Ag spends billions fighting a weed they cannot control, while food security hangs in the balance. In every seed, nature reminds us true independence cannot be patented. What would you plant if no one could stop you?